I'm really about to make a 45-minute video of just me fixing. Does my hair look okay? Oh my goodness. What's up, y'all? My name is Kirk. I'm the man behind Soul, Heart, Nerve, and Sinew. Welcome to the first episode of this channel. I'm really excited to share what I learned from all these books that I'm going to get into and share it all with you, have conversations. Maybe sometime down the road we could have conversations or maybe polls about what books I should read next and how I can deliver that value back to you. Maybe have some people on the show and, we'll see where it takes us. So I just finished reading Mastery by Robert Greene. If you haven't read my blog version over on Vocal or my podcast over on Anchor or Spotify or Apple Podcast, literally every streaming platform, it's probably there. This is the YouTube version. And so from here on out, I will be talking about the books that I've read and trying to give the best advice that I learned from those books, those lessons that I've learned from those books. So let's just get into it. So it took me about 4 years to finish reading this book, and I have to say it was well worth the read. It took me some time. I started reading it back in my sophomore year of college, but some stuff would just come up and I would probably be spending the night writing a whole research paper and then spend the next 2 months celebrating over how I finished it. And then the book would just get dropped. So boom, not done. But I finished it last week and I just finally put together all the notes and I'm ready to kind of talk about what I learned. So we'll get right into the first lesson. So the first lesson is determination. So essentially, the book is completely about mastery, right? So some essence of determination would be necessary to actually be in this book so that you can actually get to that point that you want to be at, whether it's trying to get really good at playing an instrument, being able to read sheet music and then play it right after that, or being really sociable with other people and having a lot of charisma. So I have a story for you. In my last semester of graduate school, I was trying to finish this 35-page paper that was due at the end of the semester. It was due on Friday. It was due on a Friday at around 6 p.m. and I had written 0 words Sunday. So I had essentially about 5 days to write a 35-page paper in its entirety with 20 different sources, and I wrote nothing. So that Sunday night, I decided to go to my late night option on campus, and I lived on campus at the time. I think I bought 5 monsters and a ton of boneless chicken and tons of ketchup and honey mustard, and I went right back to my room, ate that stuff, and went right to town on this paper. I think I wrote all the way through the night, and I stopped on Monday at 11 a.m. This process rinsed and repeat over and over again all the way until about Friday at 4 p.m. And like I said, the paper was due at 6 p.m. Friday at 4 p.m. I was done. And my brain was fried. I have filmed myself multiple times throughout those days, all the way until that day, and Instagram has it archived, and trust me, I regret every single day where I had to stay up again and again and again, just trying to write this paper. But I had the determination to actually finish this paper because I thought to myself, there's no other way out to get this degree. I don't want to deal with my parents breathing down my neck and yelling at me that I didn't finish this one paper that was due. And so it took me a lot of thought and a lot of effort and a lot of focused mindset to get this done. So when it comes to mastery, you have to be determined, right? You have to stick through it, and it doesn't matter if it gets boring or it stays exciting, which it won't, trust me. The second lesson that I learned from Mastery by Robert Greene was the necessity for mentorship. Now, there's 2 different kinds of mentorship. There's the one where you actually just go out there and you find someone who's more experienced in your field and you talk to them and you learn from them and things like that. Or there's the other kind of mentorship where you have a role model in mind. I'm going to speak on role modeling because that's where I have more experience. So one of my favorite role models is Gary Vaynerchuk. If you know who he is, good, great, because I'm going to save you time. I'm not really going to explain too much about him, but he's essentially a serial entrepreneur. And what I like most about him is that he has a fantastic work ethic and a personality that I can really get behind. He is both rational and empathetic at the same time, and it's really something I really admire. And personally for me, as I was learning psychology in graduate school and throughout college, that was the kind of personality that I wanted to embody, but also include my own sort of spin on it. So with that being said, the necessity for mentorship, the reason why it's so important is to help save you time. A lot of people can go their whole lives without any role models or any mentors, but they spend a lot of time trying to figure themselves out. And if you can figure out an individual or a person that you want to learn from or a role model that you want to embody, it'll save you time because they have a certain style, aesthetic, or work ethic or personality that you can just pick up on, and then once you've picked up their style, you can just put in your own spin on it. That's also really important too. The world has enough copies. We need more individuals. So essentially, whoever it is that you look up to, try and embody them as much as you can, but then include your own spin on it. That way, we retain their individuality and we stay original. The third lesson that I learned from Mastery by Robert Greene is the necessity for social intelligence. Now, there's 3 things under this lesson that I want to talk about, and that's creating genuine connections, specific behavior, and general behavior. So creating genuine connections. So what he's suggesting is that when you meet with other people, try to accept them for who they are and where they're at, and recognize what they're able to do in their own realm and in their own eyes. So this is a lot of deploying of empathy and understanding where someone's coming from. If for some reason that you meet up with someone or you try to be friends with them because you know they're going to be famous, or you know they're going to get really good at something and they get you like all these like freebies and things like that, you're essentially just using that person. You know, you don't want to be that guy like years and years down the road where, you know, your buddy actually really got famous, and yeah, okay, so you tell everyone else around him like, oh yeah, like I know that guy, I knew him before he was famous. Okay, now what? Okay, and like there's so much more to this. You know, if you were to accept this person where they're at, you would be able to see like all the struggles and the trials and tribulations that your friend went through to become who they were, and you'd actually be closer to them rather than trying to use it for clout or use it for like status and things like that. Accepting people where they're at gives them this kind of like weight lifted off of their shoulders to be like, okay, I can be myself around this person because they're not going to force me to be anything. You can be supportive, but you don't have to force them. The second thing I want to talk about is the idea of specific behavior. Now, Greene kind of goes into great detail about specific behavior, but I'm going to be really like terse about it. Specific behavior is the actions, decisions, and choices that people make that indicate what this kind of person has in terms of their morality and their personality, or just their general idea of who they are as a person. Now, it's important to recognize this because a lot of the time we use this as a frame of reference and we think that this will just be the way it is at all times. What I'm saying is that we tend to think people don't change. As someone who has met a lot of people, not necessarily that I'm friends with a bunch of people do change. I actually have an example. There's one friend of mine who I tend to think is very argumentative, always has something to say, and always has to put in their 2 cents. And over time, I realized that this guy was actually changing over the years. I've known him for about a good while now. He actually stopped participating in conversations and would actually listen a lot more than usual. And at first I was kind of like, you know, I would just brush it off. I'd be like, okay, this is probably just a phase. He's probably just going to go back to the way he is. But surprisingly enough, you know, after years went on, he actually isn't as argumentative as he used to be. And he actually does listen a lot more. And he's one of my friends that, you know, actually is a very good listener. Before that, I probably wouldn't tell him very much. Now he actually validates a lot of my thoughts and actually challenges me to be better. So in reality, people do change. So you want to like see the person's specific behavior, and whatever it is that they do or whatever it is that they say or act upon, use that as a way to kind of update, validate, or invalidate your thinking about that person, because people do change over time. You know, people who are hot-headed aren't always hot-headed. People who are always, you know, cool, calm, and collected may actually blow up at some point. So keep that in mind. People do change. The third thing I wanted to talk about under social intelligence is general behavior. Now, this is something that Greene says we all have. Those things are envy, self-obsession, conformism, passive aggressiveness, and rigidity. And so these characteristics, you know, some people have these at like extreme heights where people are like extremely envious. Some people are extremely self-obsessed, right? And in those cases, you want to try your best to just avoid those people, because what's hard about that is because they're very difficult to work around, and so it becomes hard to navigate building a genuine relationship with those people. Is it to say that you should shun them or anything? No, just try to spend as little time as you can with them, just because it's very hard to focus on yourself if these people are kind of like soaking up all the energy. So with that being said, the general behavior, you know, we all have it, right? And so to some of us, we might not have it at extreme heights. We might actually just be a little envious, or we might be the kind of person that wants to conform a little bit, or we might be just a little rigid in the way that we want to do things, you know, and that's okay. It's just a matter of being able to recognize that if you can see these characteristics in yourself, even go so far as to even ask your own friends or your own peers or your parents or whoever it is, and ask them, do I have characteristics of envy? Do I have characteristics of self-obsession? You know, that would be great if your friends actually tell you, yeah, you do. then you can actually see that in yourself. And once you're able to see that in yourself, you can see that in other people. You tie this back to the whole wanting to build genuine relationships with other people. You'll notice that you can actually have this kind of like moment where I can see these parts in you and I can still accept you for who you are. So that's the good part about having social intelligence. It builds relationships, builds rapport, and essentially you start to feel like you really belong somewhere. So using those skills makes it easier to achieve mastery because, like I said before, eventually you're going to encounter people along the way who will give you opportunities, want to be close to you, want to be friends with you, and being able to have social intelligence and not be a jerk is just generally a good thing. The fourth lesson that I learned from mastery was this thing called dimensional mind. So this one's a little complicated. This is probably as complicated as it's going to get. And it's this equation, right? So there's the original mind plus the conventional mind plus 3 steps equals the dimensional. So the first thing is the original mind. The original mind is kind of like the part of your mind that kind of just looks at experiences and just soaks it all in and doesn't really question it very much and just says like, okay, like this is what it is, this is what it's like. So with that being said, an example of this would be like the first time I ever watched Avatar, the one with the blue people. And essentially I was like, whoa, like James Cameron like literally blew my mind back in 2009. That was an amazing film. And I was just awestruck. Another example of this would be like seeing fireworks or a fountain show or a Broadway play for the first time. Like you just enjoy it for what it is. The conventional mind, on the other hand, an example of this would be the 6th time I've watched Avatar. And so as I watched this film for the 6th time, I started to realize this was very reminiscent of the Disney film of Pocahontas. The fact that the Navi language has a very weird like subject-verb agreement compared to English. It's the 2nd highest grossing film behind Avengers Endgame, and James Cameron needs to hurry up with this sequel. So I'm waiting, right? That's what the conventional mind is. It imposes a lot of like facts and opinions and looks at the details of a certain experience or a certain thing or event and kind of just picks it apart. So when you combine the original mind, which is more of like the creative, the wow, like to just soak it in, and then the conventional mind, which is like the rational, the focus, you know, there's details and things like that, you know, when you combine those together, you get the dimensional mind as long as you include the next 3 steps. So the first step is pretty straightforward. It's very reminiscent of determination, but the first step to include is to make sure that the tasks that you're doing are the ones that you actually want to do. Okay, like, yeah, you can be determined. Like, for example, when I first started working out, these were things I really didn't want to do, but I was, you know, determined enough to get it done. The second step is having this idea of negative capability. Negative capability means to have the ability to withstand and endure the moments in time on the road to mastery that will make you look silly, the hardship, the boredom, things like that. Because for example, like when I was learning Italian, right, I didn't even incorporate the accent. I was saying things like super flat, in a very American accent, and it would really make me look silly. And sometimes, you know, my friends nowadays, like back in college, they would make fun of me because I sounded silly when I was speaking Italian, and they themselves spoke Italian. They were like, you know, Kirk, like you sound ridiculous. It's supposed to be like with these inflections and this emphasis on this syllable, so on and so forth. And, you know, I felt a little dumb, but, you know, I kept at it. Now, granted, I'm not here to flex on any sort of Italian, you know, that's not what this is about. I barely speak Italian nowadays. And so, that being said, you have to have this ability to be able to look silly and know that you're not always going to look great when you're trying to get good at something. You're going to look dumb. And just try not to give it too much mind. Be able to understand that you will look silly on the way to mastery. The third step is to have deadlines. Now, this is kind of a little bit weird, but I didn't realize it at first. But all throughout elementary school, high school, and college, like, I realized that the only way I got much of my stuff done was because there was a deadline that was kind of like scaring the daylights out of me to get something done. Whenever we start a self-started project, there's a lot of excitement of like, oh yeah, like let's go and do this, let's get it done. And then as you go further and further in, you know, that intensity just kind of fades away, and that's normal. Like it's very normal to be like not very excited about like going to the gym again, right? So what Greene suggests is that instead of like trying to figure out how we can get that intensity back, how about we start like inverting? And so deadlines are essentially the opposite of that zeal, that, you know, that fervor that you feel from starting a new project. So instead of like the excitement of like getting started, there's now the excitement of the deadline coming right at you. So like I said before, being creative, keeping that, that mindset of like, wow, like this is amazing, and then combining the conventional mind, which actually picks apart the details. So maintaining that creativity and the awareness of details, and then making sure that the work you do is something that you like, and that you're able to recognize that you will look silly as you do this, and then give yourself a deadline and then get it done. That is essentially the dimensional mind. The fifth lesson that I learned from mastery was common pitfalls to mastery. So these are things that will essentially completely derail you from achieving mastery. There were like 7 of them. I'm not gonna mention all 7. I will do 3 of them that I thought were the most important to me. So the first one was impatience. Impatience, as Greene puts it, is prevalent everywhere. I'm a New Yorker, so we live a very like go, 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 go fast life. Impatience is something that we have to come to terms with when it comes to achieving mastery, because it will always be there. We always hope that something comes faster, but it just won't. I'm not gonna learn how to speak a language like this. It's just not gonna happen. There was something that my favorite role model, Gary Vaynerchuk, said, that the faster you want something and the faster you get it, the more vulnerable you are to losing it. Another example that I could give you is when I lost 80 pounds my first time back in my freshman and sophomore year of college. When that weight loss happened and I lost that much weight in the span of about a year and a half, and then I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. I was doing a ketogenic diet. Once I tasted a carb, my whole world flipped upside down. My weight went right back up and then some. It is bad. Let me tell you that it did not stay. Nowadays, me embarking on this journey again and losing around 60 pounds so far, I have worked for this and I have no intentions of going back, because I know how much trouble I went through to do this stuff and get it done right this time without rushing. And I have to say, it's really important to be patient when it comes to being a master at something. And it doesn't have to necessarily be about fitness. Whatever it is, impatience will always be there. Try your best to understand that it will always be there. It's not going anywhere. So you might as well learn to just deal with it. The second pitfall that I thought was really important to me was this idea of complacency. So a lot of the times, let's take for example, I play a game called Dota, and personally, I love that game a lot. I have sunk in an absurd number of hours, let's just put it that way. And at one point I thought to myself, I'm actually getting pretty good at this. I think I can figure out this game pretty much to its entirety. That's not true. In fact, looking back on it now, the moment that I ever said that, I started to realize I was only just getting started. And that's really a great feeling, because not only do I have so much more to learn, I get excited by how much I can learn about something, but this notion that you think you've already gotten there kind of just kills the progression that you were just making earlier. Some people who get complacent, they kind of just stop doing what they're doing. They think they're all that. Greene says that every moment that you aren't spending on getting better, you're getting worse, or you're wasting away. Now, granted, that might be a little like, anxiety inducing, but let me tell you that in some ways it's true. But what I will say about that is that wherever it is you are in your journey, just be there. Like, don't fuss over it. Like, if I'm reading a book and I'm trying to finish it, and then my friend's like, oh, do you want to go get Chipotle or something? Like, okay, I'm not gonna go to Chipotle sweating beads and thinking to myself like, I didn't read that book, oh my god, like I'm wasting away, I'm gonna die. Like, no, I'm not gonna think of myself that way. I'm just gonna be with my friend and enjoy the Chipotle, and when I get back, maybe I'll continue reading, or tomorrow, or get back to where I left off. So I'm literally saying don't be complacent, but just think for yourself for a second that if you ever think that you're getting good at something, great, but don't stop. Like, don't stop. Obviously, just keep going, because there's the road to mastery is like an eternity. So take your time, be where you're at, and try your hardest as you keep learning to make sure that you are focused and that you're actually getting into the work and making progression. The third thing that I learned was this thing called grandiosity. Now, this is kind of a little bit similar to complacency, but grandiosity is a little different and a little bit more nuanced, because a person stops progressing in mastery because they fell prey to the praise. I think my best example I can think of is someone who is losing weight, and eventually they meet somebody, and what happens is that this person that they met told them, like, oh, honestly, you're perfect just the way you are. I don't want you to change. This is great for me. Please don't change, or like, please, you're perfect where you're at. And that person completely stops losing weight or losing fat or getting stronger. Another example would be someone who was, let's say, doing it for the praise, and eventually they got all that praise, like, wow, you did so well, like, oh my gosh, this, that, and the other. And then they stop. They stop progressing, they stop exercising, they stop doing well for themselves, and you start to question, what was this person doing this all for? Was he just doing it for likes? Was he just doing it for praise? Because if he got it, that sucks. The way Greene describes it is that he says that praise generally does harm. You know, very much so like how criticism can pretty much like beat someone so badly that they stop doing what they were doing. But praise can be so good that they actually stay stagnant and they stay where they're at, and they just keep repeating that same thing over and over again just to get praise, but they don't get better. You know, that one's a little bit more nuanced, but it was something that actually kind of did catch my interest, which is why I picked that one. Be careful when it comes to praise, because, you know, even though it might feel good, be sure that you're continuing to progress. When you do achieve mastery over something, the amount of how good it will feel to be a master at something will feel way better than any sort of praise that you'll get from some other people who don't really know what you're going through, or really haven't been on that journey or tried as hard as you did to get to where you wanted to be. The sixth lesson that I learned from mastery was reasons for mastery. Now, you would think to yourself, like, maybe Greene would put the reasons to be a master right at the beginning, but he didn't. He did put a lot of like ways to kind of just build up to this point. Two of the reasons that I thought were really great, he mentions 8 of them, I think. 2 of them that I really caught my attention was authentic voice and alchemical creativity. The first one, authentic voice, this one's great because as you get further and further into getting good at something, you start to develop your own style, your own technique, your own, you know, method or like expression or aesthetic. And that's really cool, because not only do you build up this new style, you also uncover parts of yourself that you may not have thought existed before. For example, when I was going through my fitness journey, I really didn't think I was into swimming. I did a lot of swimming back then, in my own like private, you know, spaces, because I was really insecure. But then, you know, I started getting into running and cycling. And over time, I started to realize, like, wow, like I really do like running, like a lot. And I have been injured in my knees multiple times over, but I cannot stop running. Running feels so good. I discovered parts of myself that was like, you know what, I think I want to be the kind of person that runs long distance. That was even getting deeper and deeper into like my fitness journeys, that I learned I like to run long distance. And then as I went further and further, like the whole weightlifting started to get incorporated, and I started to figure out like different ways to enjoy my weightlifting experience. Nowadays, I didn't like chest presses at first. I didn't like doing squats or like deadlifts. Now I wish I could just do those all the time. But those parts of myself I didn't know existed until I kept going and losing more and more fat and getting stronger and stronger. These things, like building your own authentic voice, helps you figure yourself out better as you get better at something else. It's kind of this like positive correlation that the more further you get in your road to mastery, the more you start to unveil about yourself too. So you want to consider this, you know, journey that you're embarking on towards mastery as also not a journey towards your own goals externally, but also like how much you learn about yourself as you go through it. The second part was the alchemical creativity. Alchemical creativity he's basing it off of the notion back then when people used to think alchemy was real, where they would take like certain substances and try to like turn it into gold. So here, what he's talking about is how we turn certain things that just don't add up, like contradictions in modern life and modern society, and then turning that into material for artwork or expression or just, you know, content, essentially. One of my contradictions that I like have a lot of investment in is noticing how much university and college prices keep going up, and yet when you go online and you visit websites like Khan Academy, Code Academy, Udemy, Coursera, Brilliant, and all these different like free education websites, those are essentially free, and yet we have the cost of colleges that are like spiraling out of control. There's this contradiction here where people can learn things for free, but then the more traditional route is the one that keeps getting more and more expensive. So it kind of comes to the question, like, where should I learn where I would get the most bang for my buck, or not even have to talk about money in the first place and just go ahead and learn? A lot of these days, if you have a Wi-Fi connection, which sometimes is free, you could just learn a whole lot of things. The only things that I think you probably couldn't learn is stuff like hands-on healthcare skills like nursing or maybe even law. Think about any other contradictions that you may see, like not only just in society, but just like in life in general. Greene says that those are parts of the world that have lots and lots of potential to create great pieces of artwork and great pieces of expression that can make things very interesting and generate a lot of conversations among people. He definitely says that on your road to mastery, try to figure out ways that your work and that your efforts can also be an embodiment or an expression of contradictions that are happening in the real world. It will generate a lot of conversations, and that's really cool stuff. So the last lesson that I learned from Mastery by Robert Greene was how it feels to achieve and how to reach mastery. Achieving mastery is this feeling of having this fingertip feel on a situation, being able to read the dynamics that are currently at play that are affecting a situation at a current time. Despite what my degree says, I personally do not think of myself as a master in psychology. However, I am satisfied with my ability to read individuals and understand the dynamics that are at play that affect the person right then and there. It's this feeling of intuition and rational focus that happens at an instant. So for example, I can kind of get a general idea of what a person is like in terms of understanding their personality based on how they were raised or lack thereof, the friends that they have or lack thereof, their current goals and aspirations in life, their financial situation, their habits, if they have gone through any particular traumatic experiences or just troubling times. If I can pick those things up, I can probably get a general idea of what that person is like. And that sounds a little bit obvious, but when you pull it all together, and a lot of their behaviors start to make plenty of sense. So it's about trying to understand a situation and get it right off the bat. That's how it feels to have mastery, is that you can just see it without hesitation. You can figure out the dynamics without having to second guess yourself. And when it comes to how to reach mastery, I can tell you that you do have to set up a particular foundation for it. And Greene also mentions this as well. He does say that there are 8 ways to achieve mastery. I am not going to go into all of them. What I will say is that some of them talk about like very fervent practice, broadening your perspective, or just focusing on strengths. But primarily, you want to set up a foundation where your road to mastery is qualitatively rich. And what that means is that you not only absorb info, you internalize it and apply it. And you do that over and over and over again, and so that it becomes second nature to you, and then you just keep progressing through the tiers, assuming that there are tiers, or just getting into more and more difficult content and continuing to internalize it and make it your own, and then infuse your own style into it if you can. That's essentially the foundation behind what it means to achieve mastery. And this kind of ties into our last final remarks. Achieving mastery after reading this book is so much more than just saying don't stop, keep going. Like there's so much more to it. Like mastery is a process that will bore you, it will move you to tears, it will progress at an agonizingly slow pace. You will probably get criticism from people that you didn't even ask for, and you're going to encounter so many obstacles that will try to stop you. There's so many components that come to achieving mastery that you want to think about just how much it takes to get there. My closing remarks, I think that Mastery by Robert Greene is probably a book that I would give like a 7.5 out of 10. Maybe that rating will change as time goes on, but so far it's 7.5 out of 10. If you don't know what this channel is about, what I like to do is I like to read books and then try and categorize them into 1, 2, or 3 out of 4 categories. Soul, which is represented by cultivating a sense of awareness of direction and calling in your life. The second one is heart. So this is about having emotional clarity and being able to understand your emotions and also being able to regulate them. Nerve is about having an adaptive and a reflective mindset so that you can kind of like see things for what they really are. Sinew is about having a deepened relationship with yourself and other people. For mastery, I would definitely say this falls under soul and nerve because there's a necessity to figure out your calling, and it's very heavily emphasized in this book. And I would also say that it's under nerve because it's a lot of focus on your mindset and how you approach your path to mastery. If there was a secondary category that this book would fall under, it would probably be sinew because of how much you have to kind of deepen this relationship with yourself, and with the social intelligence component, there is that component of deepening relationships with other people. Thank you guys for watching. I know this video was really long. I'm honestly just trying to figure out how I'm going to do this. Thank you for being here on this ride. I hope that you enjoyed it and that you get this book yourself. If you're looking for me on other platforms, thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next episode. Peace!